There is something profoundly human about watching a man known for his sharp opinions and unwavering confidence finally drop his guard long enough to let the world see his heart. Sean Hannity, the broadcaster who built a legacy on strategy, ideology, and fire-forged rhetoric, recently did something no headline, election cycle, or political debate ever prepared us for. He talked about love, not politics, not ratings, not Washington, love. And in that moment, the man America thought they knew suddenly looked entirely different. Because before the cameras, before the studio lights, before the country knew his name, Sean Hannity was just a boy from Queens, growing up in a working-class Irish-American home where life was built on grit rather than glamour. His father, a court officer, his mother, a corrections officer, they didn't hand him anything. They taught him to work for it. He was scrubbing dishes at 12, cooking by 13, bussing tables, carrying trays, sweating through summer jobs, while most kids his age were still figuring out who they were. And through it all, he listened to the radio, not for entertainment, but for hunger, for possibility, for a voice that told him life could be bigger than the small rooms he worked in. When he spoke to a microphone for the first time at that tiny California college station, unpaid, unknown, unnoticed, something clicked. He didn't just speak, he belonged. And from that moment forward, his voice climbed market by market, city by city, until the nation stopped what it was doing to listen. Hannity and Colmes. The Sean Hannity Show, primetime television, presidential interviews, presidential influence, a man whose voice could shake headlines and shift conversations, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse, but always with force. Yet behind all the debates, all the boldness, all the victories and controversies that built his public character, there lived another Sean, one far quieter, more private, more wounded than the world ever saw. A man who prayed in silence. A man who missed the simplicity of Sunday dinners with his parents. A man who, despite fame, felt the hollow quiet of room success could not fill. And when he finally spoke about her, the woman he calls the love of my life, the studio lights didn't make him bigger. They made him smaller, softer, more real. Because in the end, for all his arguments, achievements, and airtime, what mattered most was something he couldn't debate or defend. It was something he could only feel. I am a believer that of myself, I can do nothing, Hannity said, his voice steady but fragile. Everything we have in this world is a gift from God. After decades of being the voice in the fire, he finally let the world see the man in the quiet. And for the first time, America wasn't listening to Sean Hannity, the broadcaster. They were listening to Sean Hannity, the man. Before the fame and the bright studio lights, before the debates and the headlines, Sean Hannity was just a young man with a voice and a dream, sitting in a small radio booth in Huntsville, Alabama, trying to convince the world to hear him. And it was there, in those early humble years, that he met the woman who would shape his heart and home for decades, Jill Rhodes. She was a young journalist then, sharp-minded and steady-hearted, working at a local newspaper when his voice first reached her through the crackle of the airwaves. What began as work calls, him asking for leads, her offering information, slowly shifted into conversations that stretched far beyond deadlines. Two young dreamers, not yet famous, not yet hardened by life, simply drawn to each other. They married in 1993 in a quiet ceremony, no flashing cameras, no headlines, just hope, promise, and two people choosing each other. Jill became his anchor as his name grew louder in the world. While his career rose, studio to studio, city to city, she grounded him in something real. They built a family. Patrick in 1998, Mary Kelly in 2001, and for years, the Hannity most people never saw was the man cheering at tennis courts, laughing around dinner tables, trying to get home in time to kiss his children goodnight. But the world is not kind to those who live in its spotlight. The long scheduling, the late nights, the constant national scrutiny, slowly, quietly, painfully, created distance. There was no explosion, no betrayal, no tabloid scandal, just two people who once walked side by side, slowly drifting into different emotional orbits. After more than 20 years, in 2019 they ended their marriage, without anger, without spectacle, without blame, just a closed chapter written gently. They never fought in public, they never weaponized their past, they simply protected their children and moved forward. But the cost was real. For a man whose voice controls a room, heartbreak left him silent. He threw himself into work because work was predictable, politics could be argued, ratings could be measured. But love was the one thing he couldn't control. And so he became quieter off-air, more thoughtful, more private. He stopped talking about his personal life completely. Friends say he carried the loss not as bitterness but as a bruise, deep, tender, unspoken. Then, slowly, quietly, life surprised him. No announcement, no dramatic reveal. Just a man who had once believed love was something he had lost forever, realizing that love had found him again. Not in his 20s, not in fame, but at 63. And when he said the words, "the love of my life," his voice softened in a way that has never happened on camera before, because this time, love was not young or uncertain. It was earned, it was restored, it was real. And after everything, the grind, the heartbreak, the rising, the falling, Sean Hannity finally understood the one thing he had been trying to say all along. Every gift in this life is borrowed, every blessing is fragile, and love, when it returns, is the quiet miracle you hold with both hands and never take for granted again. For a man whose life had always moved at the speed of breaking news, learning to live slowly was almost a foreign language. Yet that's exactly what began to happen. His career stayed at full force. His radio show continued to rank among the most listened to in the country, and his nightly television presence remained a powerhouse. But there was a subtle shift beneath the intensity, something softer, something steadier. The fire was still there, but now it lived alongside reflection. He talked more about gratitude, the quiet kind that doesn't need to be announced. Gratitude for mornings that start calm, for faith that anchors you when the world gets loud, for children who remind you what really matters, and for peace, a peace he had chased his entire life but had only recently begun to understand. The routine he adopted was almost monastic. Up before sunrise, workout, prayer, work, discipline woven into every hour. He didn't chase the spotlight outside the studio. He didn't show up at glamorous parties. He didn't entertain rumors. He held his private life like something sacred, something earned. But even the strongest walls don't stop the human heart from wanting to be known. And in that quiet ache, something unexpected began to grow. A connection that didn't come crashing in like lightning, but arrived slowly, softly, like dawn. Inside the same network halls walked Ainsley Earhart, a woman whose smile seemed made of sunlight, a broadcaster with her own story of resilience. She too had lived through love, loss, and rebuilding. She too had learned how to hold herself together when the world was watching. She was raising her little girl Hayden with grace and faith as her compass. When she spoke on air about hope, about prayer, about starting over, it wasn't performance, it was testimony. Sean saw that, and she saw him. The man behind the arguments and debate segments, the man who stayed late to call his kids goodnight, who bowed his head in quiet church pews, who had learned strength the hard way. Their friendship began like most do, unnoticed at first, passing conversations in the hallway, moments between segments, shared understanding of a world few others truly knew. Then, slowly, the conversation stretched longer. Work talk turned into life talk. Respect turned into admiration, admiration into warmth, and warmth into something you don't want to name in public because naming it invites the world in. Colleagues noticed him laugh more. They noticed that she could soften him with a single look, that he listened differently when she spoke. They sat in the back row of church, not as television personalities, but as two people rebuilding. They didn't confirm anything because they didn't need to. Some love stories are not meant for headline spreads. Some are meant for quiet rooms, shared prayers, and the kind of companionship that feels like coming home after years of wandering, and after decades spent in the noise of the world. Sean Hannity had finally found the one voice that didn't need to be amplified to be heard. What drew them together wasn't some dramatic collision of opposites, but a quiet alignment of two lives shaped by similar storms. They were both public figures with private hearts, both wounded in ways the world would never fully understand, both searching for something real in an industry built on performance and polished illusion. Their connection didn't announce itself. It grew in the silences, in shared glances across studio hallways, in conversations that drifted from news headlines into faith, family, and the things that keep a soul from breaking. And while neither of them felt any need to name it publicly, anyone who saw them together felt it instantly, the ease, the warmth, the gentleness that replaces the armor when you finally feel safe. For Hannity, a man who had spent years building walls so high even those closest to him couldn't see over them, this was healing he didn't expect. For Ainsley, who had learned that love could fall apart even when you give it everything, it was proof that grace can return after heartbreak. Then came the moment that changed everything, not during a heated debate or a high-profile broadcast, but in a soft, unscripted moment when truth slipped past his defenses. Sean Hannity, the man known for his iron spine and unwavering certainty, spoke with a tenderness that startled even his most loyal viewers. He talked about gratitude, not for ratings, not for influence, but for someone who had stood beside him, someone who understood his silences, someone he quietly called the love of my life. His voice didn't boom, it warmed. His expression didn't challenge, it softened. He didn't say her name, he didn't have to. The pause, the faint smile, the kind of emotion you can't fake, all of it pointed to Ainsley. At this stage of my life, he said, barely above a whisper, I'm just grateful I found someone who makes me better every single day. And in that moment, the world saw not the broadcaster, not the political warrior, but the man beneath, older now, wiser now, and finally open to something gentle. At 63, Sean Hannity is living a new chapter, one not driven by headlines but by heart. A chapter where love arrives quietly, chooses you slowly, and stays. A reminder that no matter how loud the world gets, the most meaningful revelations are the ones spoken softly, just once, to the person who hears you even when you say nothing at all. Hey guys, thank you again for inviting me into your Bible study circle. Little old me in the middle of all that faith and heart, I'll take all the prayers I can get. We all need them. We're all just trying to walk through life with grace. And as I've always said, we live in the greatest country God ever gave to mankind. But the moment Sean Hannity let the world see behind his usual composure, behind the iron edges of debate and policy, it sent a ripple far beyond his nightly audience. Viewers who had watched him for decades weren't expecting it. There was no setup, no dramatic pause meant for headlines, just a man speaking from a place deeper than confidence. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't posture, he simply told the truth about love and gratitude. The reaction was immediate. Commentators didn't know what to do with it. Some called it surprising, others called it refreshing. But for the people who had followed him for years, it was grounding. It made him human in a way politics never could. And the irony was, professionally, his vulnerability didn't weaken him, it strengthened him. In an era where many public figures carefully build digital facades, where everything is curated, edited, polished, Hannity's moment reminded viewers that authenticity isn't weakness, it's courage. Those who admired him respected him more, and those who didn't see him the same way could at least understand him more. Yet the biggest shift happened inside him. The man who once carried his personal life like a locked vault began to let the light in. Slowly, quietly, not for the world, but for himself. He didn't suddenly parade his private life in front of cameras. He didn't explain, justify, or advertise. But there was a softness in him now, a peace, the kind that comes when you stop guarding your heart and start living with it open again. Because at 63, Hannity wasn't chasing reinvention or applause. He was embracing something more meaningful, gratitude, companionship, and the quiet certainty that love doesn't have to be loud to be real. His story is not just about finding love again. It's about the courage to believe that your life isn't finished just because you've seen heartbreak. It's the reminder that it's never too late for joy. The lesson is simple and profound. Your heart is still capable of beginning again. Hannity showed that strength isn't about never breaking, it's about learning how to rise when you do. That gratitude isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And that the human heart never retires. It keeps hoping, keeps reaching, and when the time is right, it finds what was worth waiting for all along. Love.